What happens when one of the biggest stars in the world quietly struggles with something most people would never notice from watching him perform? For more than 2 years, BTS V appears to have carried a personal health problem almost entirely out of the public eye. Then, during a recent live stream, he finally opened up about something that immediately caught ARMY's attention, a significant difference in hearing between his 2 ears. V didn't make the revelation with dramatic language. In fact, the way he described it was surprisingly simple. He explained that if the hearing in one ear were at 100, the other could only pick up around 30. That comparison alone gave fans a completely different perspective on what he had apparently been dealing with behind the scenes. And the most surprising part is that this wasn't something that had happened overnight. According to V, the problem had continued for around 2.5 years. During that time, his hearing gradually became worse. Yet even as the issue continued, he admitted that he initially didn't see it as something serious enough to seek immediate medical attention. That decision makes the story much more complicated. V is a performer whose career depends on sound. Every concert, rehearsal, recording session, interview, and live performance requires him to constantly listen and react. So hearing a statement from him comparing one ear to 100% and the other to only 30% naturally left many fans wondering how long he had been dealing with this quietly. But there was another detail that made the revelation even more personal. V connected the worsening of his hearing to his time in the South Korean military. He explained that his hearing became worse while serving, but instead of immediately treating it as a medical problem, he found himself surrounded by an environment where physical toughness and mental strength were heavily emphasized. That apparently influenced how he viewed his own symptoms. V explained that because the people around him were physically active and constantly pushing themselves, he began thinking that his hearing problem might somehow be connected to mental strength. In other words, instead of immediately thinking, "Something could be wrong with my health," he started convincing himself that he simply needed to endure it. And that may have been one of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding the entire situation. When someone is constantly surrounded by people telling themselves to push harder, it can become surprisingly easy to ignore warning signs. A problem that should probably be checked by a doctor can start feeling like something that simply needs to be endured. V eventually admitted that he essentially convinced himself that it was a matter of mental strength. For ARMY, that detail may have been even more difficult to hear than the percentage itself, because it suggests that the issue wasn't simply something V discovered recently. He had been living with it, working through it, and continuing his career while apparently believing that he could simply overcome it. And this is where the timeline becomes important. V spent part of those years serving in the military between 2023 and 2025. After completing his service, he returned to a world that had changed dramatically. BTS were preparing for their next major chapter, and the members were once again stepping into an intense schedule filled with music, rehearsals, promotions, and performances. But behind that public comeback, V was apparently still dealing with a hearing issue. There is something striking about that contrast. Fans see the stage. They see the lights, the choreography, the massive crowds, the microphones, the perfectly rehearsed performances, and the confident image that BTS presents to the world. What they don't necessarily see is what an artist is dealing with before walking onto that stage. That is why V's recent admission hit differently. He wasn't revealing some dramatic career scandal. He wasn't announcing a shocking change to BTS. He was simply talking about something personal that had apparently been affecting him for years. And now his attitude toward the situation has changed. V said that he is regularly taking prescribed medication and frequently visiting doctors. That detail is important because it shows that he is no longer treating the issue as something he can simply ignore. Rather than trying to push through it the way he apparently did before, he is now taking his health more seriously. That doesn't mean fans should assume a specific diagnosis or predict what will happen next. There's still a lot the public simply does not know. V has not publicly provided enough medical information for anyone to determine the exact cause, long-term prognosis, or whether his hearing will completely recover. And this is where online speculation needs to be handled carefully. Since the revelation, some fans have naturally begun looking back at older BTS footage. Certain moments in past videos have sparked questions about whether V might have already been experiencing difficulty hearing at the time. But those interpretations remain fan speculation. There is no reason to turn an old clip into proof of something that V himself did not publicly connect to his condition. What fans can know for certain is what V chose to reveal himself. The problem had lasted for years, it had become worse, and he is now receiving treatment. There is also another reason this revelation feels especially significant. V isn't currently living a quiet life away from the spotlight. BTS are in the middle of an enormous global chapter, with their international tour bringing them back in front of stadium-sized audiences. Every performance demands energy, concentration, and coordination from all 7 members. So the timing raises an obvious question. How much effort goes into maintaining those performances when an artist is dealing with a private physical challenge? The answer may be impossible for fans to know completely. What we do know is that V continued working, and that is perhaps what makes his revelation so powerful. Not because fans should romanticize someone pushing through a health problem, but because it reminds people that the polished performer they see on stage is still a human being dealing with things the audience may never know about. Then another unexpected detail emerged from the same live stream. V wasn't the only BTS member discussing a physical problem. Jungkook also spoke about an injury involving his shin, including inflammation and micro-damage. He has reportedly had to take precautions during performances, with some concerts involving him performing while seated. Suddenly, the conversation surrounding the live stream became much bigger. It wasn't simply about one member revealing a private struggle. 2 members were discussing physical challenges while BTS were in the middle of an extremely demanding global schedule. And that creates a completely different perspective on what fans are seeing during the tour. The audience sees 7 members standing under enormous stadium lights. But behind those performances are rehearsals, travel, recovery, medical appointments, exhaustion, and the constant pressure to deliver the kind of show millions of people expect from BTS. And V's hearing revelation adds another layer to that reality. Because for more than 2 years, fans may have been watching him perform without knowing just how much he was dealing with privately. But the story doesn't end with the revelation. In fact, the timing of V speaking openly about it may be the most interesting part of all.